Earlier this year, there were some really important health studies conducted on COVID-19 patients with concurrent fungal infections. These studies are quite ominous in hindsight, because India, which has been hit very hard by COVID-19, is now seeing a disturbing rise in a particular kind of dangerous fungal infection. Mucormycosis is an infection caused by saprophytic fungi of the order Mucorales. These saprophytic fungi exude chemicals to break down dead or dying biomass. The infections in humans are pretty rare because most people generally aren't dead or dying, but mucor infections can pop up in people who are immunocompromised or who have severe injuries like extensive burns. The fungus is able to infect the damaged or immune-compromised tissue and begin killing cells with secreted digestive enzymes. And while it's doing this, while it's eating the tissue from the inside out, it's also spreading into the bloodstream. There are different types of mucormycosis depending on the tissue, the body region, or the organ that's been infected. And the fungal pathogens can infect most tissues too, from skin to bone, from intestinal tract to sinuses to the brain. One of these studies that I looked at was a retrospective observational study that analyzed the medical data of 18 patients from Bangalore, India. The paper and its source data describe, quote, patients presenting with aggressive maxillofacial and rhinocerebral orbital fungal infections, unquote. Which basically means that these are medical case documents on patients who have aggressive mucormycosis fungal infections in their mouth, in their nose, in their eyes, and in other facial areas, as well as fungal infections of the brain and parts of the nervous system. Of these 18 patients, 16 of them had diabetes. Another 16 of the patients, including 15 of those with diabetes, had also received steroid treatments for COVID infections. All of the patients, all 18 of them, had fungal infections, but 16 of them specifically had mucormycosis, also known as a black fungus infection. And apparently this is pretty rare, but it's particularly dangerous. Of these 18 patients, 6 of them died, 11 survived, and one of these patients apparently went missing and could not be contacted for follow-up. And that's always a problem with these long-term medical studies, is you always have some percentage of the patients who just get lost. They don't contact the researchers back, they drop out of the study. In every long-term medical study like this, you always have some small subset of the population, of your sample population, who is going to provide you either no data or useless data, because they're going to start the process, but they're just going to be lost to follow-up. Always happens. Anyway, in their statistical analysis, the researchers found that the risk of fungal infection was highest with what they called the unholy trinity of COVID-19 infection, uncontrolled diabetes, and corticosteroid treatment. Now, there was another study published that same month that looked at mucormycosis infections generally and the historical and current mucormycosis situation in India. They describe many of the risk factors for mucormycosis infection, including diabetes and immunosuppressant drug treatment in the context of solid organ transplant. Corticosteroids are immunosuppressants, and they've been used recently for patients with COVID-19 infections, as mentioned in the first study. Also in concurrence with the first study, the second study notes that rhino-orbital cerebral infections are the most common form of mucormycosis in India, followed by a pulmonary form and a cutaneous form that's common in burn victims. Several months after these studies were published, there was a news story that started coming out of India about a rise in black fungus infections. Now, India has a very unique relationship with mucormycosis. It's been estimated that these mucormycosis infections are 70 times as common in India as they are globally. And India is the only country where people with competent, undamaged immune systems can still suffer mucormycosis infections of the kidneys. This surge in mucormycosis in India is currently at an estimated 45,000 to 46,000 cases. In late June, when there was about 41,000 cases, it was reported that 53% of these patients were taking a steroid treatment for some other ailment. 64% are comorbid with diabetes, and 85% of them are also comorbid with COVID-19. A particularly frightening trend seen in the data is that the patients tend to be young. Only a quarter of cases are patients over 60 years old. 3/4 of patients are younger than 60. A full third of the patients are between 18 and 45. Even more frightening, India is running short on amphotericin B, which is the preferred drug used to treat mucormycosis infections. The drug is typically given in combination with surgery to remove the fungus, and the surgery, unfortunately, is often disfiguring. Depending on what part of their face has been infected, patients may be losing one or both eyes, their nose, even parts of their jaw to the surgery that's required to remove all of the infected tissue. And worst of all, the mortality rate is estimated to be around 50%. More than 4,000 patients have died from this already, and more will certainly die before it's all over. Fortunately, there is a working explanation for this sudden and shocking rise in mucormycosis cases. In India, where oxygen supplies are running low in many places, doctors are reportedly using steroid treatments to reduce inflammation in the lungs. Apparently, doctors in India use steroid treatments pretty often, even for minor things that may not require it. In the context of COVID-19, the steroids help patients breathe easier when there may not be enough oxygen tanks available, so that's good. But the steroids can also rapidly increase blood sugar levels, and that can be dangerous. In diabetics, it can be extremely dangerous, as the out-of-control blood sugar level can cause clotting. Widespread clotting in capillary beds can lead to tissue being deprived of oxygen and nutrients, and this can lead to oxygen stress or even necrosis. Now, mucormycosis doesn't really spread from person to person, but it can occur where there are buildups of fungus inside of rooms or buildings. Fungal buildup in hospitals could have opportunistically infected COVID-19 patients, who are already at risk of tissue necrosis due to a general lack of oxygen. Diabetic patients were extra vulnerable because the combination of steroid treatments and diabetes put them at a much higher risk of blood clotting and tissue degradation. Currently, the mucormycosis in India is being treated with alternative drugs that are also effective, but are generally more toxic and have more side effects, including risks of kidney damage. Amphotericin B, the drug that's used to treat mucormycosis, is both in short supply and expensive. With the drug treatment alone, not including like the hospital bed and any other fees and costs from that, the drug treatment alone can cost between $18,000 and $30,000 per patient. And because India is still dealing with its second huge COVID wave, its hospitals are still packed, and its oxygen and amphotericin B supplies are still low. Diabetics, who are immunocompromised, are still at a higher risk of COVID-19 infection, which means that the COVID patients in a given hospital are likely to have a higher proportion of diabetics than the general population. So all of the risk factors are there for this mucormycosis epidemic to spread. We can only hope that India's medical establishment, currently pushed to the breaking point by the COVID-19 pandemic, we can only hope that they can design and put in place effective countermeasures before this new mucormycosis pandemic gets much worse.